Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Joyner. She is the current president of the National Association of Social Workers. She's the past president of the Baccalaureate Program Directors and the Council on Social Work Education, BPD and CSWE. Professor Joyner was educated through HBCUs, and her greatest role is being Gigi to her two grandsons, David and Jacob. In fact, her grandsons are the main reasons that today she remains committed to the arduous task of working to achieve racial, social, economic, environmental, and political justice for all. Mitt, thank you so much for being here today. It is a real honor and pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. And I wanted to, there's a program on television called the Red Table Talk. And so I am inviting you into my red dining room. And the reason why I have you in my dining room is because it is the strongest area for Wi-Fi, and I didn't want to freeze up on you. So I welcome you to my dining room.
That's outstanding. I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be invited in.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to let folks know, thank you for joining today's live stream. The audio for this is going to be posted on the Social Work Podcast for posterity. And we will have a version of this with closed captions at some point. But I wanted to say that I'm going to be talking with Mitt about some questions that we've come up with, but also we really want to hear from you. And so please add your questions and comments in the chat box. One of the things that I've learned to love about live streaming in the era of COVID is that people process what's being said on a live stream in the chat. And so you're able to connect with your colleagues, your coworkers, people that you don't know around some of the topics that Mitt's going to be addressing in today's conversation. So please make sure that you're adding your voice to this conversation, and we will be picking out some questions to ask Mitt. So just one other thing, I am going to be looking at the live stream, and I'm also going to be on, we're using Zoom. And so you might see me look back and forth. It's not that I'm distracted by my cell phone or anything like that, but that's what's happening. So Mitt, so our nation is in the midst of recognizing, confronting, and addressing the multitude of ways that we as individuals and our institutions perpetuate systems of injustice. How do you think about social injustice?
Okay, first let me say thank you for everyone for joining me. I am here as trying to give my vision of what I hope to achieve at NASW. I do want you to know that NASW is an organization and there's two sides to NASW. I am president, so that means that I make sure that the governance of NASW, but we have a CEO and his name is Angelo McLean, and he is the one who carries out all the operations and does a great job. So you can always talk to me or talk to Angelo. We work together. We have a great board of directors and would love to hear from you as well. So when I think of injustice, I really look at injustice as it relates to social inconsistency. Now, being an HBC, BCU person, I learned a long time ago about Leon Chestang's theory, and I'm not going to go into it, but it's about character development in a hostile environment. And what he stated was social inconsistency and social injustice equals personal impotence. So when you see things in your life, like if you're speeding and going 90 miles an hour and the other person is speeding and going 100 miles an hour, but the police stop you, you wonder like, whoa, that's inconsistent. Well, life has been inconsistent for people of color for a long period of time. And so out of that, there are a lot of injustices. Injustices exist in every major institution that we have, where people are not treated equally. Equity is what I believe in. So when we see that as social workers, we need to address it in whatever we're doing, be it on, and we always have this argument sometimes about the micro, meso, and macro, but I believe that we are responsible for all three levels. So when you see an injustice with a person in your community, or an injustice with a person at work, or one on the macro system, it is up for us to address it. And so the world collided with COVID and with the pandemic of racial injustice, which I believe has started in 1619. And because of my life experience, I have lived many, many racial injustice upsurge or upticks. And social work, where are we in all of that? So I really love the fact that a lot of people are giving a lot of ideas, and that they want to do something for change. And so they want to make sure that those inconsistencies no longer exist. So with social justice, let's look at it as and I will get into later about politics and the political system, but we saw that with our police officers, right? And we saw someone kneel, and I would say a racist officer kneel on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And the world said, that's enough. Enough is enough. And the world took to the streets. Unfortunately, in these United States, generally the only time the world listens is when people take to the streets. So I was not upset about what occurred, and really sat there and looked and listened, and in my own way protested what was occurring. But now it's time to do the work. Now it's time to roll up these sleeves and make sure that Mr. Floyd, Mr. Aubrey, Breonna Taylor, Elijah Cummings, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, all of their dreams are addressed. And all of them, is all they ever ask for is treat me as an equal. And that's what justice means to me.
It's beautiful. Thank you. So I loved how you connected the sort of the micro, the meso, and the macro, and so one of the related questions is, what do you see as the role of social workers and social work institutions like NASW as, in terms of being part of the problem, right? Individuals and institutions as being part of a socially unjust or racially unjust system. And what do you see the role of individuals and institutions as being part of the solution?
Right. Well, I wouldn't be a part of anything that's part of the problem. I'd quit, tear up my membership, and I will tell you that from the very beginning. The very fact that NASW, and so it's important to know one's history, or it gets lost, stolen, or strayed. NASW has a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. That's part of what the social work profession says that we must do. So I'm always looking from bottom up, and community engagement is very important to me. And policies that we have as a profession, I always ask the question, well, did the community want that, or did a group of social workers want that? And so we constantly have to check on, who are we serving? Now, we also are a member organization. People join NASW, and we work and help the members of our association. We don't get a tax base, so it's not something where we get dollars from the public. We really kind of represent our members. So yes, NASW has a responsibility to respond to racial injustice, the pandemic, the workforce issues as it relates to our profession. We need to always remember that we are the professionals, and we will always be professional as the way that we address things. But do know that I stand on some great shoulders, because when I became president, I got a lot of emails, and people were like, "Oh, the first African American president of NASW," and I'm like, "No," and they're like, "Well, the first female," and I'm like, "No." Whitney Young and Lorenzo Taylor who were the architects of the March on Washington, were presidents of NASW. And then you think of all of the other people. I mean, you have Dorothy Harris, you have Ruth Maiden, Barbara White, Gary Bailey, Darrell Wheeler, Elvira Del Silva. You have, who am I missing now? Myself, Joe Allen. Every one of those individuals were people of color. But then, and maybe this is why I really, have an allegiance to NASW, is Mark Battle was my professor at Howard University on the macro track. Mark Battle was the executive director after he left Howard at NASW. And then Josephine Nueves, and now we have Angelo McLean. African Americans who all are working to bend that arc of social justice towards equity for all. So I love that I'm a part of that organization, but I also understand the role of NABSW, Howard University. We actually chartered a plane and went to Los Angeles in 1974 when there was a position taken on whether or not African American kids should actually go into foster care, could be adopted by white families. And it was a battle on the floor, I want to tell you. And I learned a lot about, wow, look at these powerful African Americans. So it is the beauty that in our organizations, when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, yes, it reflects the demographics of our society. And yes, we have hard conversations, but we address racial justice, not only racial justice, all the isms. Just recently, you do work probably with Michael Lindsay, and he was at our NASW conference, and the data that he gave us of young African-American kids who are killing themselves, right? It's alarming. It's alarming. And then there was, Xander, who talks about the very fact of transgendered people and how they're being, how they're dying and disappearing. I mean, we in social work should be doing this more and more. So I vow to come on, and not only on your podcast, but at any podcast, and really talk about the issues that we must come together on. So, and that's what NASW is supposed to do, and that is what we will do.
Thank you. So first of all, I think it's so important for people to know the history. And at the same time, I recognize that we can't point to what we've done in the past and say, we did it. We're done. It was sufficient, because it's obviously hasn't been, right? And I think one of the most detailed criticisms of NASW, and by the way, I realize that you're not speaking on behalf of NASW.
Right.
Speaking as president of NASW, which I understand because I'm president of the American Association of Suicidology, is a volunteer position. And but one of the most detailed criticisms of NASW was penned by a group called Social Service Workers United Chicago. And this is on medium.com. And in that post, they identified several issues that have been issues for really as long as I've been a social worker. I graduated with my MSW from UT Austin in 1996. And these include higher pay and better working conditions for social workers, and funded internships for all social work students. And they also called for an approach to social work that centers the liberation of oppressed communities within social services. So I'm wondering, what do you see as the role of NASW in addressing pay, working conditions, and the approaches that social workers and social service agencies take?
We have a role and responsibility to advocate for higher pay. We do that, and we need to continue to do that. There are a few bills. I mean, the Dorothy Height and Whitney Young bill is one that addresses those issues and those concerns. Doing a workforce survey is hard in social work. And the reason why it's hard in social work is because not everybody, and so I say to everybody who's out there listening, make sure you will put BSW, MSW, DSW, whatever you are behind your name, because to be identified as social workers helps us with that workforce issue.
Right.
But as you well know, that social workers can work in the for-profit, non-profit, all of different sectors. We have social workers who go off into the academy, such as yourself, and they never, some don't address themselves as social workers. And then we have to really work hard for title protection, because sometimes you will have social workers who may have a degree in phys ed, but will get a job as a child welfare person. And they're allowed, in some states that's allowed to happen. So we advocate for title protection. We are really trying to work on policies that will address that issue. I know CSWE keeps data on the workforce as it relates to professors, how much they make, and so we're able to take a glimpse of that. But when you get out, and I know myself, when I got out on the baccalaureate level, I worked in child welfare, and then I went back to school, returned to child welfare, but then I went to the academy. So we have to try to figure out how to track social workers, and we have to do a better job at it. Because when we do go to the Hill, and this is one of these times, actually, this is a time in history when we can promote, because so many people are saying, but social workers do that. Social workers handle mental health. And at the same time, to say, yes, we do, but we also need to have get paid for the quality of lifestyle that we need to have, so that we don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs and be burnt out. So yes, NASW has a responsibility of doing that. Now, let me just kind of say that CSWE, as far as taking care of placements, CSWE is accredited. They're the sole accrediting body in the United States, Puerto Rico, and Guam for social work education. And they themselves are accredited. They're accredited by CHIA, so they have to follow certain rules. But internships, of course, we would advocate that internships be paid. But who really can say all of that is through CSWE. And I'm not passing the buck to CSWE. I'm saying that all of the organizations, be it CSWE, ASWB, NAD, where all these little acronyms that we have, we come together and we advocate for things, and we don't always agree with each other. We're like, you need to do this a little bit more. But we're not all in one house. Years ago, I was a part of that conversation. It was called Wing Spread, which was to bring all of social work in one house. And probably the reason we failed is because we looked more at the house than we looked at what are the things that we did in common, and how could what were the things that we could work on together. But when you look at social work, it has so many different organizations. But when you go to the Hill, the senators and the representatives, the first question is, where are you? Are you in my state? And how many members do you have? And that's the attention you get, right?
Well, and I think that, you're raising so many important points about, yes, NASW has a responsibility to advocate for the highest pay possible. There's sort of a myth that, it's a badge of honor to burn out of social work. Like, see how dedicated I was burnt. Like that's totally not true. That doesn't serve anybody. No. There's also a way in which this issue of social worker pay and sort of income has to be connected with the amount of money that's available for services and the question of who's paying for those. And I think your point is really well taken about, paying student interns, which is that it sounds like even if NASW wanted to sign on and say, yes, we advocate for interns getting paid, it would almost be hollow, because it's not something that NASW has authority over. And the question is, in my mind, is there a way in which if agencies are paying interns, does that then reduce the amount of money that is available to pay the licensed professional social workers. And I say this not because I think that, the United States is a poor country. I don't think it's a poor country. I think we have enormous resources, but I also know at a practical level that there are limited finances that are being allocated towards social services. And so the legislative work that NASW is doing, and I know Sarah Butts is doing great work at NASW, is so important, because that is part of what's going to open up pots of money. So I appreciate you tying.
Right. And not only that, Jonathan. Remember, we have chapters in states. So when you look at NASW, I don't want people to always look at it at the national level. It is critical. It is critical that they remember to engage on the state level, and to also in the state level into your division. I wish I could pass a bill to be able to say $5 of every tax dollars goes to social service. I mean, I think we would be fine if things happen like that. So there's things that we need to look at on the local level, on our national level, and on our federal level. And the state chapters help us with that national level. And a lot of people look at NASW at the federal level, but a lot of the work that's done is through your states, because what is different for me in Westchester, Pennsylvania, probably is so different from where you are. So it's important that I work with NASW in Pennsylvania and the Brandywine chapter to kind of talk about, here in Chester County, we have a lot of Mexicans. I actually worked on and served on our food bank, and we have food deserts. We're supposed to be one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, right? Yet we have food deserts in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, which is a large majority of African American, and then in our rural areas where we have a large group of Latino workers, right? And I, raise Cain all the time, like we've got to put, and one day I even said, we have to, somebody said, oh, we have a truck and we take trucks out. And I'm like, yeah, but people are afraid of ICE. We've got to run an underground railroad for food. We've got to be able to make sure those that are getting food do not get picked up. And people were like, ICE, what are you talking about? And as I was a social worker on that board, to be able to explain to people. And that's our role. I mean, that really is our role as avid social workers, is to explain to people, because sometimes people just, for whatever reason, don't know. And someone walked up to me after that meeting and said, I would have never thought that Latino people could not come to the truck because they were going to be picked up. I'm like, yeah, that's real in America. That's what's happening right now. So it's important to then get that over to our chapters. And so what we do in the Brandywine chapter might be completely different what happens in the Pittsburgh chapter of NASW in Pennsylvania, okay? And that's what I even say about the schools of social work. We should be collaborating a little bit more together with, schools of social work needs to collaborate with the NASW or any groups that are out there, because practice, working with those most vulnerable people, we have to hear their voices. So that last part of your question that you talk about, I always come from the bottom up. I always come from, well, what does the community think? And what are we doing from the community? And I want to hear the community voices. And I even want to have community members at the table. So at the food bank, I'm like, how do we have food for people, and we don't ask the people what type of food they want to eat? So let's bring them to the table, because we were growing things that people would not, they were like, that's okay, I don't want squash today. I just don't want, because a lot of the food banks were moving into health food. And believe me, I understand and I appreciate healthy food. But if you have a child who's left at home that has to feed the family while mom and dad take 2 or 3 jobs, they're not going to cut down a squash and cook it, So what are the things that we could help? And that's where you have to kind of look at it and liberate the community, so that the community can state what they want. I agree with that.
So I
get hyped. I'm sorry.
No. Get hyped. Like, yes, that is, yeah, I would please get hyped, because this is really important stuff. And I also have to say that, the chat is really active, and there are a ton of really important comments. And I'm just going to jump in. And again, for the live stream, just so you know, I'm not going to name names, not because I don't want to, but I just want to avoid mispronouncing people's names. And I think it's
Sure.
really the questions themselves that are more important than who's asking them. But, one of the things that was shared was, regarding higher pay for social workers, what do you think about increasing unionization in the field? And related to that, there was a comment that was, do you think that pay is low because social workers work from a scarcity mindset?
Well, first, unions. I'm a believer of unions. Unions are very beneficial. Whether there's one union, I mean, social workers already belong to a lot of unions. I know when I taught at the college, I was in a union. It gave us great pay, protected us. So yes, I believe in the unionization of social work.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as pay, I would always tell my students when they started, we have to look at social workers' pay. There are some social workers that make a heck of a lot of money, and there's some that don't. And so I think, again, it goes with our classism that we practice in this country. If you are working for those vulnerable people, most likely you will make less dollars, right? But as you move up the scale, you make more dollars. And why we lost so many people who wanted to hang out their shingle, because they saw that as a way of, wow, I can make more money this way. In the VA is probably the largest employer of social workers. They stay on their GS scale. So, they make a sufficient, I'm not going to say, money that you would find in the for-profit world. We have social workers who are in the for-profit world. So again, that kind of goes with, how do we get a glimpse? And then where do we work in those areas? And mental health workers, they need more pay, right? Because they're coming out of, and I want to say this, COVID is going, these agencies are going to be hit. This is not going to be a time where there's a whole lot of money for social service. We're going to see a lot of places close. I am sitting here waiting for this next CARES Act to get passed to see where those dollars go. Encourage people to apply for them if they are eligible to receive. But a lot of social service agencies, they're going to close. Simple as that. So it is important for us to be on top of that, to use our lobbyists and make sure that the social service agencies are able to keep their door open at the most critical time in our society. You see the numbers every day. Native Americans. I was just reading about Michael Lee, who died, a Navajo person who died on the Navajo reservation, and their demand for "come help us." We have a lot of work to do in that area. Not only to increase the pay of ourselves, but to increase the pay of those who are vulnerable.
Yes.
That is most important to me. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that what you were alluding to right there at the end about finances and pay. I mean, we live in an economic system that has been rightly called out for being racist and for assigning economic value based on disparities in race, gender, other demographic characteristics. Right. And I love the sort of the thought experiment of saying, what if we did have enough money, and how would that change services? One of the comments before on the thread talked about, as legislation moves forward, and again, this is where your comment about local chapters being really important for social workers in those areas, and not just national level, but as local level policies move forward around defunding police, it's critical that any piece of legislation looks at the finances.
Most definitely.
It's involved in that defunding or the reallocation. Right. Again, I'm conscious of the fact there's a continuum between defunding and the abolition of law enforcement, but that those funds be delegated to social services. Otherwise,
Right.
that won't happen. And so, so
You know
relate.
what?
Go ahead.
One issue that I'm looking at right now is schools opening. And I heard the person that lives at 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza yesterday talk about the fact that, all of the money that they're going to put in this CARES Act for schools, and people are going to have a choice. If your school doesn't open, you can take these dollars, and he wants to say, he doesn't really have the power to do that, but that those dollars will then be able to go out into charter schools, because that has been a part of this agenda anyway. And I, as a social worker, just wrote a question. Right now, every school district should say, whenever we go back to school, you will not have the summers off for at least the next 2 to 3 years. How do we catch up? Those that are in public education, and we know that there are a lot of vulnerable kids in public education, and they need to be in school. And in the summer, their parents scurry to find a camp or try to do things through latchkey because they don't have the resources. Right now, we should be taking a position in every community to say, whenever that door opens again, we will postpone all those summer vacations. We needed to get into that model anyway. So perhaps this is strategically our time to do so, and demand that school districts take a look at that now, because the big question is, how are we going to fund it? Well, let's figure it out now, so that when schools open, we can get kids caught up, at the same time give the quality of education that we need to have. We could take a position on that. We would work with our school social workers, we would work within our communities, within our states, but that is something that hit me like a ton of rocks last night. Like, why are we gonna, somebody said, well, we go back in January, school's out usually in May. Why should school be out in May? Every school should have air conditions, right? Every school should begin to prepare for the fact that that child might be there. And that's where the social worker's voice needs to be heard, because we need to go into the community and say to the community, to the parents in the community, is that a plan you could get behind? If so, let us help you so that we can empower your voices at those town hall meetings in your township, at the state meetings. Let's talk with your governors. So many people think that social workers have to do the work. Social workers empower people and give people the information so that they can bring the changes to their lives. That's the most powerful thing you can do as a social worker.
Yeah. Well, and this is all related to, what we were talking about before, about one of the roles of, NASW at the national and also the local level is advocating for the profession,
Right.
The legislative work, the lobbying, and so there was one of the statements in the Social Service Workers United article on Medium.com said, the NASW the NASW needs us. We don't need the NASW. And I was wondering how you respond to that statement, especially given that you said that one of the ways that NASW can be powerful when it's lobbying is to say how many state chapters it has, how many people it represents. So how do you respond to the statement that the NASW needs us and we don't need the NASW?
So when I read articles, I kind of look for sources, and I couldn't find any primary sources in that article. So that kind of turns me as like, where do people get the information in this world of reading little synopsis? Sometimes we come up to conclusions that are not accurate, So what I would like to do, and when I read that, for us to ask our members, do you find NASW helpful? And then what I hope to do is to expand the membership. Look, let's be real honest about membership. When I was in my BSW program, I was told that I had to belong to my association. And the work that we do, when people are in law, they are told the same thing. You gotta belong to the Bar Association. When people are in medicine, you gotta belong. If we want to be a profession, If we really, and our profession is young. Remember, we were just founded in 1955. So I don't really, law has been there for decades, and so has medicine. But if we want to get in with the big dogs, as they say, we have to increase our numbers. I mean, that every time we go to Capitol Hill, that is the first question that they ask us. The good thing that we have is to be able to say that we have chapters in every state and in all the territories, and that gets that ear up, right? But we have to understand that there is a political system, whether we like it or not, and that is how bills become law. To be able to sit in there with your legislator and help design a bill, to know the markups that are going to happen, to make sure that bill represents the community, because we all do know that once legislation is passed, it's very hard to get amended. So there are over 800,000 social workers in the United States. Let me say that again, 800,000 social workers. And yet we have 120,000 members. So there's a lot of social workers that opt out. I don't understand that. I really don't understand that. And I say that because I always remember, why did I come into this profession? I didn't come into this profession for me. I came in here because I wanted to make sure that everyone had a voice. Everyone was able to have their dining room, right? And invite people in, that people were happy and that they had a quality of life that they so justly deserve. I know that not everybody can be on the same social and economic strata. I understand that. But people should be able to be happy and have a quality of life. And for social workers, we have to really think about, helping, and paying it forward and being sure that those voices are represented. I used to tell my students who would always say, well, we really can't afford it. So I would tell them, you know what, take out a jar and put all your change you get every day in that jar. And then as soon as you have membership money, pay for your membership. Ask your parents. There's a lot of things that we can do. And yes, we need to help people so that it becomes affordable. I understand that. But without numbers, if I could walk in to my senator's office and say, I represent 500,000 people, I know some things are going to change in Pennsylvania. So we have to think about that, what happens on that macro system. And, people can email me. I can give you a lot of ways to kind of help you pay for your membership. We used to have at our school, I would have the students sell roses. Do whatever you need to do, because it's not important for you, it's just important for the people that you're serving. And just like you said earlier, I have 2 African-American grandsons, and they live in Washington, D.C. And I want to be able for them to get in a car and drive to Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I don't want them to have to worry about a police officer being on their neck, okay? So that is why I stay committed to these kind of things.
And so I love the idea of, there are ways to raise the funds for membership. And I think that one of the questions that's out there is, even if I had the money, is NASW an organization that's going to fight for my values, going to fight for me as a professional? And so I'd like to kind of almost flip that in reverse, if I may, just to throw this out. One, does NASW have an obligation to represent social workers who are not members? Right?
Right.
So go ahead. Yeah.
We represent the profession. Yes. So we have that obligation to do so, and we do that. And in fact, over the last couple of months, we really have talked about, and I've talked, and Angela has talked with me, and we've talked, how can we reach the non-members? And now we've all learned about this thing called Zoom, and you can have thousands and thousands of people on a platform. So how can we better do that? How do we get out and engage with them in a way where they don't feel like they have to be members? Of course, I would love for them to be members, and I'll tell you a way that I have. How do I say this? Okay, so all of the issues of the injustices that we are in today are under attack. And we have something that we could do right now as a profession to change that. And that's to get out this vote. Now, I don't mean you going to vote. I mean, I would like to hear from every social worker, every group. I'd like everybody to develop a matrix. What is going to be your deliverable? Set a goal. We're going to get 1,000 people out to vote, right? And then tell me exactly all of the deliverables you're going to do that, right? How are you going to educate people in your community about the vote? The down ballot, right? Because right now the school board people are important as it relates to COVID, right? So how do we take some of our placements? Because placements right now, CSWE did pass that there are ways that we can do placements online. So how can we ask some of our students to give us all the information about everybody that's running, and then get that out into the community? And then how do we execute that day of voting? Do we take water out? Because we don't know, it could be cold, it could be hot, it could be raining, it could be snow, and we don't know what those conditions are. But social workers could mobilize and look at those places that have those long voting lines. We've already seen it already, and take out water, take out chairs, become placeholders. Stacey Abrams has her group of Fight, Fair Fight, where we might want to be the Viola Luzos back in the Montgomery, Alabama days, where we drive people there. I just saw where Kamala Harris is trying to pass a bill where you can drive and vote, where you put your vote in like you're going to the post office. Well, remember, some people may not have a car. Are you willing to take your car to do that? We could right now on this call, not even be a member of NASW, you could write to me at presidents at socialworkers.org and tell me exactly what you're going to do to mobilize your community to guarantee that that person exercises their right to vote. And you can give them the information. You can register people to vote. There's a lot. See, what I think that social workers do sometimes is we have all these websites with all this information. And then people might say, oh, where can I go get some information? I don't want you to get the information. I want you to use the information and then tell me what you're going to do. And what I'd like to be able to do as NASW president is to take all these metrics that come in and talk about, okay, we're going to get out the vote. This is what we're going to do. And this is what exactly we did. And I would like to write up a report that I will send to the next president of the United States to say, this is how social work mobilized themselves. And now we need you to listen to some of the things that we want. Those are things that we could do. Whether you're a member of NASW or not, you can write about, tweet about, Instagram about. This is important. You know why? Because this next election is critical to people of color. You've got DACA, you've got the Supreme Court just ruled on the pipeline, you've got LGBTQ that's on, you've got every issue that we're talking about. And so one of my colleagues that I was talking with recently, he was a white male, and he said, I don't really know that. And I'm like, that's because you don't have anything to lose. If you wake up and you are white, you may not have anything to lose, but believe me, this election matters. And it's not something that social workers can just sit home and get distracted about. We have 100 days left. That's it, 100 days left. And in my community, I've already seen some Willie Horton. Whoops, we gotta go back here. Is that back?
You're back. Yeah, you never left.
Okay.
You never left.
Okay.
You are on fire.
All right. No, but Willie Horton with Bush, right? Those ads. Well, in Pennsylvania right now, you're seeing an elderly white woman who's about 84 years of age, who is trying to dial her cell phone, and it has the next administration will defund the police. Then you see a person at the door. His glove is black. His head is wrapped with a skull cap, that's black, the mask is black, and his skin is black. It is the most racist thing I've ever seen. It's on television today, right? If we as social workers don't get behind and try to change this, we won't have a discussion. I mean, you talk about defund the police. Police will be here. You already have the secret police that are going all into every city that we have right now. So how is social work strategic? And it's important for us to think of our strategies to bring about change, our strategies to bring about change. And I'm not saying the next administration, that the vote that I will have can do it all, but I know if I could write up a document to be able to say, this is how 800,000 social workers mobilized, and this is what we came up with, and this is how we got this today. Now we need something from you. Hey, I'm willing to write up the plan if people submit what they're going to do. You know, put your money where your mouth is. That's what my father used to say. We have to, as a profession, make sure that we protect the right to vote. It means too much to too many people.
That's right. That's right. And the comment thread is hopping, and I just want to issue a challenge to the folks that are listening to right now, if you have a plan for how you're going to help get out the vote, write that in the comment box. It would be important to have this down, right? This is not something we have to sit in and think about for the next month. This is something that if you're like, yeah, actually, I'm going to go around my block and I'm going to make sure that everybody's registered to vote. I'm going to talk with my clients, make sure they're registered to vote, which we can do as social workers. We can make sure people are registered to vote. We can't tell them who to vote for, but we can help them register to vote. You know, I just want to, you know, there are a couple of like voting in social work and vote.org, and there are initiatives that are happening right now that social workers should know about, and I know that I think Pat Shelley might have listed some of those in the comment thread, so thank you.
And now, listen, this is the time. Let me just say this. This is the time to talk with your neighbors. Now, you know, I know that these conversations can be hard, but social work is hard. Whoever said it was going to be easy? This is the time that we have to talk with our families and our neighbors. You know, someone just asked me, my neighbor, somebody asked me, and I'm like, you're not going to listen to me right now. I'm an African-American woman. I'll be glad to come. You all must have, it's the coffee, there's, in the 70s, they used to have these coffee clashes where people came around and talked about really why did they vote. It's time to host them. So I'm going to ask the people to host some of those in their communities, have those hard conversations, do what we can do. I want to be able to, don't have me come back in December, and don't call me in December and say, oh, wow, what are we going to do now? If you have it, try to excite people about the right to vote.
Yep. I just want to say that a couple of people have already posted. Somebody's going to spend time organizing around Fair Tax Illinois to get more state funding for social services. Somebody else is planning on working on election day as a poll worker, which I think these are all excellent things. So I just want to say thank you, Mitt, for having your call to action, and I want to thank everybody who's posting in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say, you know, we have about 12 minutes left in this conversation. I feel like we could go all afternoon and that nobody would get tired of this. But I know you're busy, and so you know we will end on time. Now, so the, you know, we're talking about everything that social workers can do and things that NASW can do. So what would happen if social workers stopped becoming dues-paying members of NASW, in effect, defunding NASW?
Oh, it would be catastrophic. It would be catastrophic to the people that we serve. You know, again, back to my HBCU roots, I always was taught, if you want to bring change, pull yourself up to the table. So this idea that if I don't get what I want, I'm going to pull out. I've always been taught, if it's not going my way, let me get in there and make sure that it does. So I challenge everybody to think about that. I mean, think about the individuals that we serve, and think about if we were not there to protect them, you know, and so I'm going to put the challenge, because I'm not even going to address that question, Jonathan, because you know what? It is not going to happen under my leadership. We are not going to defund. What I would love for us to do is to have a larger breadth and depth so that we hear our volunteers. I mean, you know, remember that NASW is full of volunteer. I volunteer. This is not this is all volunteer time. So what are some of the ways that we could maybe reach down? I think what we have done before, or, when things are good, we do things like, okay, I have a problem, NASW, and then we take it and we solve your problem and call it back, right? And we have ethics people at NASW. If you have problems with ethics, you can call. There's so many different things that we have. But the one thing that I hear people wanting to do is the engagement piece. So the engagement piece, again, I would love to hear the EDs of NASW say, you know what, there's so many people calling me now wanting to do something, I'm overwhelmed. I would love to solve that problem than to have the problem of we don't have enough volunteers.
Right.
I would love to solve the problem of every chapter when they have a ballot to be able to say, we have too many people that are putting their names in, then we can't find 2 people to put their names in. See, we all have that responsibility to pull ourselves up to the table when we want something. Not want something for ourselves, but we want to improve our community. And that is what NASW stands for. And that's what NABSW stands for. And the Latino social workers stand for. All that is what social work stands for. Don't take your apples and go home. Because you know what? That's what some people want to do. People want to defund social service altogether. People could care less if the vulnerable people are being served. We are their voice. We are the voice for the voiceless. And you have to use that voice and you have to fight. So, anybody knows me in any of the organizations that I have ever participated. I am not the person that says, yeah, you're right. I am the person to say, why are we doing that? And how do we do that? To improve our services, to make sure that we are representing all people, to make sure that the bottom up has a voice, because we know those from the top down will use their voice, but the bottom up needs to have their voice. So I'm not going to entertain that question, like I said, because if you really believe that, then give me a call. And when we're out of COVID, let's sit down and talk. That's the one thing that we have to remember. We're problem solvers. That's what we learn in the classroom, how to solve a problem. And so I'm not saying it has to be my way, doesn't have to be your way. There's a way in the middle. So let's talk about why you feel like, well, I'm taking my money and I'm going to go home. And let me say, I'm going to put your money right back in there because we're going to listen and we're going to engage, or we're going to get you to kind of understand. So that's my answer to that.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. Now, you just mentioned the NASW Code of Ethics. And one of the criticisms of the Code of Ethics is that it doesn't explicitly address anti-racism, right? And that there has been a criticism of the Code of Ethics that it prevents social workers from criticizing the profession, institutions, and calling out other social workers. So can you speak to why the NASW Code of Ethics, why NASW hasn't sort of hopped on this moment to add anti-racism to the Code of Ethics?
So Dr. Kennedy came out with a wonderful book, and anti-racism is something now that we are all discussing and engaged in, and I thank him for a great contribution. To change anything is a process. And so there is a process. Members know the process of changing the Code of Ethics. Now, I listened to Dr. Kennedy the other night because he had a Zoom call from Washington, D.C. And he gave the definition of what anti-racism is. So in the code, the definition exists, but the word is not anti-racism. And as we know that the evolution of words, when I was growing up, people were called African-American, well, it was called Black, my mother was colored, all those kind of things. Those words evolve. And so how do we make sure that we stay up on the evolution of the new language? So, there is a process. I tell anybody that they could work in that process. I also think that there are procedures and standards where that word can be placed in there right now. But do let me know that we always look at every policy, every procedure with the thought process of the definition of anti-racism, to make sure that it is equal and accessible for all people. Even when we come to hiring a caterer, we make sure that it is an inclusive. I mean, so that we're not always just giving it to our friends, that we make sure that we give to minority-owned businesses and other businesses that need that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we live up to the definition, but the actual language is not there because the language actually became new. This part about social work not being able to criticize oneself, it is really not that. It is with respect, right? You know, we all use language different. You probably know that I'm an old school person, but the fact of the matter is, how do we, when we are addressing a colleague or something within the profession, number one, how do we use the evidence? You just can't say that Ms. Joyner does not believe in anti-racism and post that all out on Twitter. You've got to be able to talk to me and then be reaffirmed, like, oh my God, did she just say that? And then use that knowledge and put it out. And I think our code protects us for making sure that we do our homework when we're talking about a colleague or an individual or a program. And so freedom of speech is here, but we are professionals. And it's important that we use professional language when we're addressing one another.
All right, well, thank you. And so just so that people are clear, if, you know, you've talked a lot about opportunities you would love for, you know, the NASW state chapters to say, Mitt, you know, there are too many people that are volunteering. I don't know what to do. Like that would be a good problem to have.
Right.
So where, you know, are there, what would be the channels that somebody would go through, whether they're a member or not, to talk with NASW? And again, that could be state level or national. And I'm saying in quotation marks because I know NASW is not a thing. It's a collection of people. So
people.
So who would they reach out to? How could they, I think the comment in the box was written, you know, channels for pulling up a seat to the table to encourage NASW to be more open to member concerns.
Right. Well, if you're in a state, you would talk with your ED and have the ED, you know, I always say I like to start with the division. So I would always go to the Brandywine division, you know, when they have something. But you can call up and say, I need you. What are you having? Everybody has websites. Mm-hmm. You could demand a session so that I have 12 people we want to know. We're going to come over and talk and see what we're doing. I'm going to be inviting, and everybody's probably going to say, oh God, here goes Mitt. But I'm going to be inviting people to Washington, D.C. I want people to come in and, you know, once this COVID, if I don't have to serve 3 years through Zoom,
right.
But if I am able to get to Washington, D.C., I want to invite young people or new to social work into understanding what we do. Understanding what the staff does. I want to take people to the hills. Not if you're coming from Ohio, it's great to go up and talk with Joyce Beatty because I got an Ohio person with me. So, and I want to say this because, you know, in my closing is one of my friends just died, John Lewis. And John Lewis was an individual, and I got into his office because of his chief of staff. His chief of staff is Michael Collins. And Michael Collins has been his chief of staff for 20 years, but he's a social worker. I contacted Michael when I was, I guess, president of CSWE, and I wanted to get into John Lewis's office. He opened up the door, and I was able to get into that office more times than not. I was able to give John Lewis an award in Georgia, the President's Award. He got his social work award. But he always would say to me, you know, you need to show up, you need to stand up, and you need to speak up. And anytime that I would be like, wow, should we do that? You need to show up where change needs to be made. You need to stand up and say, I have something to say. And you need to speak up about what it is. That's why John Lewis was the bridge. So in his memory, I want to close by saying I got to keep his memory alive. I mean, the day that he spoke at CSWE, his wife was in the hospital and she was dying. We didn't know if he was going to show up. And Michael said, I don't know if he's going to be there. He called me. I don't know if he's going to be there. The staffer said he's going to be there. The next thing I heard, the staffer said, come to the door. And I went to the door, and John Lewis said, let's us just stroll in here. And he took my arm, and we strolled into a meeting. It was one of the most powerful things because he said, I had to stop and see my wife. And I said, I understand that. The day that when his wife died, I sent him a card. Do you know I got a note back from John Lewis saying thank you?
Oh,
So I want to be that kind of person that I want to hear from everybody. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get everything back. It's been overwhelming. I've only been in office 22 days, but it's been, a whirlwind. But I want to hear from you. So if there's something that I can do to lead you to the right place, that is why I'm here. That is what leadership does. We show up and then we kind of help people get to where they need to be. And sometimes there'll be obstacles. Things may not always happen the way you want to. Remember systems theory, you're going to take 2 steps up and 1 step back. But as long as change is happening, we're doing social work.
That's beautiful. Well, man, I could not have scripted a better end to this conversation, Mitt. I want to say that the thread was on fire. We had over 250 comments, and there was a lot of folks were talking about, being part of NASW and how to be effective in talking with folks. And I want to thank you for reaching out and saying, I want to do this. I want to speak. I want to be public. And I think that this kind of thing could be amazing for every state chapter president.
Right.
Doing.
And we are doing that. There's going to be several, I think 8 or 9 sessions that NASW is going to do that are listening sessions and engaging with people. All the state chapters are doing things as well. And if there's something that we're missing, please tell us. We're not perfect. I don't want to ever say any organization is perfect. It's an organization, right? So if we misstep or do something, pick up the phone and call us. We are not the NASW. The NASW is Angelo McLean, CEO. Give him a call, email him, email me as well. We're people. And we want to make sure that we are serving the most vulnerable people. You see my Freddie Douglass over here, right? That is somebody that I firmly believe, agitation is important, but also leading and being where the difficult conversations are equally as important.
Well, thank you for stepping into leadership, and thank you for addressing some of these challenging but important questions. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Mitt.
I thank you too.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.
All right. So.
Okay, we're off.